We are live talking 2026 NFL offseason here on Proline TV, the Ourlads Football Network. I'm your host, Greg DePalma. Thanks for tuning in as we talk about the Washington Commanders. And when we do that, David Harrison joins us from the Locked On Commanders podcast, also part of WUSA 9. How's it going there, David?
Doing good, man. How are you?
I'm doing all right. The last time we spoke was early enough in the season where there was still a completely different landscape for the franchise coming off of the championship loss to the Eagles. Things did not work out. Changes, of course, usually happen when that occurs. And the big changes I want to talk to you first before we get into personnel were the assistant coaches, notably offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. Why did they make those changes, and what do you think that might do to their scheme changes in 2026?
I think something that the Washington Commanders really fell victim to in 2025 was a lack of ability to adapt to not only what opponents were doing against them and had figured out to do against them after having a year full of 2024 regular season and playoff tape to digest and dissect, but also with the player turnover, with the new people that came in, it just didn't really seem like, with the new blood that was on the roster, that there was a whole lot adjusted to incorporate that new blood. You look at guys like Von Miller, and you would think that going from an edge group that had like Dante Fowler in it last year to one that has Von Miller in it, you should be more dangerous and more potent as a pass rush, and that just wasn't the case. And then on the offensive side of things, you bring in Deebo Samuel and quite literally almost to the snap and the rep, his usage and Olamide Zaccheaus' usage from 2024 basically mirrored each other. So same game plan, same strategy, different players. And, in theory, as a general manager and as a head coach, when you give your coordinators better talents, you expect them to come up with better schemes and be able to do more things. And I think that's really ultimately what it boiled down to, was just not enough, advancement in the football operation. And the two people who are most responsible for advancing that, outside the head coach being responsible for it, of course, the entire operation, is the coordinators. And so, I think that's why they moved on from them. They brought in two guys who both come from a background of programs that are known for that adjusting ability, and have at least proven in their first comments to us that is kind of where their mindset is being able to be mentally adjustable, flexible and agile in everything that they do.
So starting on defense, do you anticipate there being changes to the scheme as far as the alignment overall?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that, the first thing you're going to notice from Durante Jones is a concerted effort to figure out where these guys work best. And, a lot of that work is going to be done behind closed doors, behind the scenes. I mean, the players report back for the offseason program starting April 20th. And so that's when the coaches and the players will really get to work on finalizing and figuring out who they're going to be. And surely, both coordinators are going to have their ideas. They can have some conversations with players during the offseason. They just can't issue, playbooks and things like that. But you have some conversations, and, you ask a guy like Frankie Lou, hey, Frankie, last year, not the greatest follow-up to a second team all-pro season from 2024 to 2025. What are some things you felt like could have been done differently? What are some things you kind of felt like held you back? And now, if you're Durante Jones, you take that information along with, what are some things I know Mikey Sainterso likes to do as a corner? What are some things that Quan Martin likes to do as a safety, Deron Payne as a defensive lineman? And now you've got all the levels of your defense, and you start kind of putting a plan together to get all those guys moving in the same direction. And then, they start putting together. So by the time we get together with them in May to start seeing OTAs and mandatory minicamp early June and all that stuff, like, it's our first look at them, but they've really been doing this thing for a couple months at that point in time together. And so that's what's going on now, is figuring out all those nuances. And the good news for especially Durante Jones is he's got Darryl Tapp, he's got Tommy Donatel, he's got Ken Norton Jr. So he's got at least one veteran coach at every level of that defense to kind of sit there and be able to go through the tape and say, see when he does this, or, wherever he does this, like, this is the kind of thing we like him to do, and move forward from there.
Okay. And of course, we can take a look at what Minnesota did with their recent defenses, and maybe that'll give us an indication. But bottom line is it's going to take us a little while before it's a guessing game, pretty much. It's not going to be as easy when fans are going to try to predict or understand who they may be going after in free agency or the draft based on, well, we don't know which position so-and-so is going to end up playing because we just don't have that intel yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fun thing about it is the players they go after are going to tell you more about what the system is intended to be than anything else. You know, like when you look at that Brian Flores defense, a lot of people want to point to, well, Durante Jones is going to run a Brian Flores defense. Okay, you say that, but in 2023, the quote unquote Brian Flores defense was incredibly blitz heavy, brought 6-7 people on a very regular basis, played a lot of man coverage. In 2024, it was a little bit more zone coverage, still very aggressive, but more zone based. And then in 2025, they had a very large uptick in 5-man front usage. So even that quote unquote Brian Flores defense has been different every year, at least going back to the last 3 years. And so that's kind of the key there. Like, the constant is the style. It's aggressive, right? That's the constant. But how you get after being aggressive, that's where the art comes in. I think Durante Jones, that's what you should expect from him, which means you really can't expect any one thing until you start to see it on the field.
Okay, and then offensively, Blau had been with Washington already for a couple of years. So are they looking to get his intel for before he became a Washington Commander, before he sat under Cliff Kingsbury the last 2 years? Because you had mentioned they're looking for guys who came from these sort of systems. So is that what they're looking for with Blau? Because obviously it's the first time for him as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that experience is incredibly valuable. You know, coaching under Cliff Kingsbury for the last 2 seasons. David Blau also played for Cliff Kingsbury in Arizona for a season. He's also played for, Kevin O'Connell, the Minnesota Vikings. He's played for Ben Johnson and the Detroit Lions. He played for, Darrell Bevell, who was an offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions for a period. Anthony Lynn, running backs coach of the Washington Commanders, was an offensive coordinator that David Blau played under for a period of time. And that's really where it boils down to is David Blau's, encyclopedia of experience going back through his NFL career and all his stops and the coaches that he's worked for. But not just that, also all the way go back to Jeff Brom and the Purdue Boilermakers. That was his head coach in Purdue and what they've been able to do there and just kind of the mentality of it. And what I always kind of go back to right now until we actually start to see his offense in motion is David Blau's opportunities as a starting quarterback, which wasn't much. It was 7 games total in his career. But, as a starting quarterback, you have a little bit of input into what the script is going to be and what the style of play is going to be versus when you just come into a game, So as a starting quarterback, 2 out of the 7 games David Blau started, he threw a 75 or more or a 75-yard or longer touchdown pass in the first 3 plays of 2 of those 7 games. So it shows you that this is a guy who wants to be aggressive by design, but also there's a purpose behind it. The purpose isn't just to take, Hail Mary shots early in the game. It's to show the defense, hey, we're coming out here with a mission. We're coming out here with a purpose. You're going to have to guard the entirety of the field, which, of course, makes those 11 men spread out a little bit more and give the quarterback more room to operate. And I expect that type of offense, at least from a stylistic standpoint, to exist in Washington.
No, I'm sure Jaden Daniels likes to hear that. Okay, so let's talk about free agency then, and just make sure I've got this right. So there's a lot of cap space, one of the best in the league right now, about $76 million, which means they're going to be able to make a couple of big splashes if they want to. And the 7th overall pick, but no picks in round 2 or round 4?
Yep.
Okay. Other than that, so what's the total amount of picks?
They've got 7 picks off the top of my head. I want to say it's first round, third round, fifth round, or they may not have the 5th round, actually. I think it's first, third, 4th, 2, 6th, and a 7th. It's either a 4th or 5th round, 2, 6, and a 7th.
I think it's I think they.
On the top of my head, I'm getting a little bit
second
swapped.
or 4th. Okay.
That's about what they've got. Yeah.
But 7th overall. So, and we're going to get into what we did our first mock a few weeks ago. So we'll see who we had up there. Okay. So free agency starting on offense. The top guys, you got Debo, obviously at receiver. You got Zach. You also have Chris Paul at left guard. Not that he had a good season, but out of the main players on offense, and there's a lot of them who are free agents, including restricted free agent Chris Rodriguez. Which are the guys, because they have enough money, which are the guys that you think will be priorities?
Yeah, I mean, I think Chris Rodriguez will be back, like you mentioned. He's a restricted free agent, so they can tender him, with a pretty solid deal, yet not, a whole lot of money, and keep him in house. And I think he's proven valuable enough that they're going to go ahead and do that. I don't expect Austin Eckler back. I don't expect Zach Ertz back. Quite frankly, I don't expect Deebo Samuel back either. In fact, his the contract that they reworked with him when they traded for him from San Francisco voided as of this morning officially. So that $12.4 million dead cap hit is solidified on their books, which is something that they could have tried to avoid if they worked out an extension with him before that deadline, or even work out an extension to come up with an extension to avoid that deadline and that dead cap hit. And typically, I think the rate is something like 68% of the time. If a team allows a player's void year contract to expire, then they don't typically re-sign that player. And I think that's kind of the way it's going with Debo. Wouldn't be unhappy to be wrong about that. I thought Debo was a great fit for the team. And if David Blau could have a better plan for him than Cliff did, I think that it could be very valuable. Chris Paul is an interesting case study. Not a great run blocker, not a great, space mover and all that stuff in the line of scrimmage, but a great pass protector. He was really good as a pass blocker, and obviously protecting the quarterback is item number one. If the Commanders feel like he could, take some strides in the running game this year after getting so much starting experience last year, and then obviously they could go ahead and make a deal. And if the price tag stays pretty low, I don't think that he did so much in 2025 that he's going to, go out there and break the bank anywhere. But certainly could be a competitive market just for people looking for starting caliber linemen, because there's just not a lot of them out there.
True.
But Chris Paul is someone I definitely imagine the Commanders are at least going to want to sit down and have a conversation with. But how that turns out is the key there. But I think a lot of turnover on this roster is what I expect from 2025 to 2026.
How about Mariota? Will he be back?
That's going to be interesting. Marcus went out in 2025, the offseason of 2025, to try to find, other opportunities and just see if there was a better situation for him. And it wasn't that he didn't want to come back to Washington. It was just, give himself the fair shake of seeing what's out there. So I do think Marcus Mariota has a possibility of being back, but I do think he's probably going to take that avenue again and, at least kick the tires on a possible deal somewhere else. And, everybody knows that the quote unquote open negotiating period starts at a certain time. But, the dirty secret that's not really a secret is these conversations start happening very early on. So if Marcus gets, the sense that his market is not going to be very good, then that deal may get done sooner rather than later. But ultimately, I think the Commanders would have interest in bringing him back. I just don't know if he's not going to find a better option out there somewhere else.
Okay, on defense, same question, because a lot of these guys did not perform well last year that are available in free agency, but Bobby Wagner just keeps just moving on and on and on, and he doesn't seem to lose much of a step, or at least not too much. Do you think Wagner will be back? I don't know. I have no idea, of course, when he's going to eventually retire. But what's the case on defense?
So my gut feeling on Bobby Wagner is that he wants to play another season, and if he wants to play another season, then I think he'll be back. I don't think Dan Quinn or Ken Norton are gonna move on from him. And even though there's a new defensive coordinator, I think Durante Jones. There's a thing about this business, and Durante's been in the business a long time, and Bobby's kind of one of those guys that has almost earned the rights to kind of decide what his future is going to be. What's curious about him is I almost wonder if he comes back, but is kind of willing to take maybe a KJ Wright role. If they feel that Jordan McGee is ready to step up, or if they go out there and draft somebody like Sonny Styles out of Ohio State in the first round, if Bobby's willing to take on more of a side role and a mentor role than being, the every down quarterback of the defense role. I can't speak for whether or not Bobby would be willing to do that. That's obviously a decision for him to make. But I think it'd be something interesting to watch. Dietrich Wise Jr., the veteran, only got to play about 1.5 games for the Commanders before he was lost for the season. But I think even in that 1.5 games, you kind of see what the idea was and what the potential impact of his presence could be. So I'd like to see them bring him back. And then the rest of them, Jacob Martin, I thought did a really good job stepping up, playing a lot more reps than he was expected to due to those injuries in the front seven. So if Durante Jones sees a fit for him in that scheme, much more of a stand-up outside linebacker type, I think, I would enjoy seeing him back as well. And then outside of that, you've got a lot of depth veterans like Eddie Goldman and Jonathan Jones that, certainly they could come back on a cheap, veteran deal. But also you could see the team wanting to move on. Adam Peters did say they do obviously want to get younger. It was the oldest team in the NFL last year, and every year, whether it be through draft picks, undrafted free agents, and then even free agents on the market that might be, 26, 27 years old, there's ways for rosters to get younger, also get a little bit faster, especially on the defense. Durante Jones wants to be incredibly aggressive. So you need speed to be able to do that.
Okay. Were they satisfied at all with Jake Moody? Will he be back? Are they going to be looking to draft or maybe sign a kicker?
I don't think I would expect them to draft a kicker, especially with the limited capital that they have, especially in the first, 100, 200 picks, things like that. I mean, look, if there's a guy sitting there in the 6th or 7th round that they think could be competitive and they get wind that somebody else might take them or something, then sure. I'm not gonna sweat too much a 6th or 7th round kicker, things like that. But yeah, I would expect some competition for Jake Moody if Jake Moody is back, just himself. I wouldn't be surprised if they bring in 2 completely different kickers that we haven't had on this team or haven't seen on this team yet. I honestly, I kind of felt like they made a mistake going away from Zane Gonzalez when they brought in Matt Gay last year. Not that they shouldn't have brought in competition for Zane, but maybe keep Zane, bring in Matt, have the competition. But that's just my opinion versus their decision making. And the kicker position has proven across the National Football League, not just in Washington, to be one of the, if not the hardest positions to really nail. So yeah, I expect at least somebody to be brought in for competition, if not 2 new kickers altogether.
Oh, including punter. Okay. They'll move on from Way.
Oh, Trustway's back. Trustway signed a 1-year extension, so he's back for his 13th season with the Commanders. Yeah, I mean he's a guy that the locker room needs, special teams ace, Pro Bowler, all that stuff. So Trustway, Tyler Ott, those 2 guys are locked in. It's the kicker position that you're wondering about.
Bringing a couple guys there. Okay. Out of the cap situation, even though it's good, what are they doing with Marshawn Lattimore?
I expect Marshawn to be released. I think that'll be ultimately what will end up happening is Marshawn Lattimore will be released. The question mark really is Daron Payne, on whether or not the team is going to kind of just ride into the season with his $28 million cap hit or if they're going to do something different. I kind of get the sense that an extension, not necessarily on the way. And of course they did an extension. They could kind of, spread out the remaining money a little bit, lessen it, give him a few more guarantees than he has and just kind of lower the overall value of the contract. I don't get the sense that that's, coming. There could potentially be a rework, kind of like what they did with Debo, just take this year 1 or this final year money on this contract, lower the cap hit, extend out a couple of void years that aren't actual, real money additions, but just accounting, more of an accounting measure than anything else. You could see that happen potentially. But I think Daron, I'm kind of 50-50 on him. I think there's a chance he stays. I think there's a chance he goes. And it really just kind of depends ultimately, I think, on what Durante Jones sees on tape and what he thinks the player is capable, but also what his scheme will be capable of with the player included in it.
All right, I'm going to move in. This was our first mock draft. David Bailey was the pick, an edge rusher. So as I close out this interview and ask you about the team needs, is edge rusher at the top? Is there a absolute number 1 need that the team has that every fan knows, or is it really a mixed bag?
I mean, as of right now, if you look at the way the 2026 roster is laid out today and who they have and who they don't have, edge has to be the number 1 priority, right? I mean, pass rusher is obviously incredibly important in the National Football League. And right now, the only edge rushers that they have on roster for 2026 are Dorrance Armstrong Jr., who's coming off of a knee injury, and Javonte Jean-Baptiste, who's coming off of a season-ending injury himself. So without the benefit of free agent, without the benefit of any players being re-signed as of right now, you have to go edge because the 2 guys you have, you don't even know what they're going to be coming back off their injuries. And especially with Dorrance Armstrong, he was on a Pro Bowl caliber pace when he was injured, unfortunately, for the season. And the thing about ACLs, especially, is most players with an ACL will tell you that first year back, you still don't really feel like yourself all the way. It's really that second year, which the problem with Dorrance in that case is this is the last year of his contract with the Washington Commanders. So if this year he doesn't really look like himself, it's going to really hurt his bargaining position, if he has any at all for the future. And if you're the Washington Commanders, you look at it, and again, like I said, you only got 2 under contract this year anyway, but one of those 2 that you have under contract is getting closer to the age of 30, and his contract is set to expire at the end of the season. You got to get younger there. You got to get somebody in the building. So as of right now, edge rusher over everything has to come into play. Now, as free agency goes through and as they bring back Dietrich Wise, they bring back Jacob Martin, and they go out there and say they sign Trey Hendrickson as a free agent, then certainly those needs could potentially change and those things can shift. But as of right now, edge has to be the number 1 thing.
Okay, then let's round out the rest of the team needs. So edge would be number 1. What else would be considered a priority?
I mean, I think receivers got to be a priority, especially if you don't have Debo coming back. You've got Terry McLaurin over there to be, your X receiver, but he can't do everything by himself. And Luke McCaffrey, I think if the more David Blau's offense looks like Ben Johnson's offense, and you have the need for a power slot like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Luke McCaffrey can fill that role, not as dynamic as Amon-Ra St. Brown can, but he can fill that type of a receiver role. So you need that other opposite, perimeter receiver to be a stretch the field type of guy, and they just don't have him on the roster right now. Jalen Lane certainly has speed, but at his size, it's kind of hard to see him being a consistent, perimeter down the field type of receiver. You can't really do a lot of 50-50 things with him. It's going to be a lot of back shoulder and a lot of, hitch routes and digs and things like that. So you need someone that can kind of go out there and run that full complement of routes for the opposite side of Terry McLaurin. And so for a guy like that, I think you're looking at like a Rashid Shaheed. Brandon Ayuk is a guy that obviously is being talked about a lot for his friendship with Jaden Daniels and his contract situation in San Francisco. So those types of things are obviously going to play a factor. But I think receiver certainly is one of them. That left guard position, again, depending on how they feel about Chris Paul. Also Brandon Coleman, who got some starts at left tackle when Laramie Tunsil got injured, things like that, how they feel about his development. And then, of course, the secondary, what the plan for Quan Martin, Will Harris, Trey Amos, Mikey Sainristil is going to be. And then if you do move on from Marshawn Lattimore, then, it's someone like Mansour Delane out of LSU going to come into the conversation in round one potentially. So there's a lot of spots you could say the team needs and a lot for Adam Peters to do. But with one thing we've seen Adam Peters do the last 2 years is he's going to make it to where, when we get to the first round of the NFL draft, there will be multiple avenues he can go because he's going to do enough on his roster to give him that kind of flexibility.
Would it surprise you if they did a really good job in free agency, a Hendrickson, maybe another edge rusher, that they could target what they would consider best player available and even go running back with Love?
If they put themselves in that position, they absolutely could put themselves in position to go with a guy like Jeremiah Love. They could put themselves in position to go for a position like tight end. His name is escaping me right now, but the tight end out of Oregon, I feel really disrespectful for forgetting his name because I've talked about him a lot on Locked On Commanders, but very kind of classic wide tight end type. He can line up in line. He's not going to be a liability as a blocker, but then he can also attack the seam, attack the intermediate part of the field, and really be a receiving threat for you as well. And that's the kind of tight end that, again, the more Ben Johnson we see in a David Blau system, the more that type of a player really makes sense. Now, in that case, unless his stock really takes off, you're probably hoping for some sort of a trade back situation where you recoup some draft capital. Maybe you can land him for your offense. And, look, it would be 3 years in a row, right? Jaden Daniels last year or the first year, Josh Connolly Jr., the year after that, and then a tight end this year, or even Jeremiah Love this year. It'll be 3 years in a row they go offense, and people might kind of scratch their heads. You got a head coach who's a defensive-minded guy, but you're going offense all 3 first rounds under Adam Peters. But, again, it just depends on the moves they make between now and then and where they see that fit. And, best player is always still tied in somewhat to biggest need, right? Because if the best player on the board is a quarterback and you have Jaden Daniels, you're not drafting that quarterback. You're going to a different player, and that just is just the way that things go. So that's what every general manager's goal, every general manager I've ever talked to, their goal is to have as much optionality as the word that Adam Peters uses. I use flexibility. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
But that is every general manager's goal, is to have as much optionality, flexibility, whatever you want to call it, when draft weekend arrives. So I expect moves to be made across the roster. How many big time moves, Trey Hendrickson, names like that, should you expect? I would say probably no more than maybe 2 or 3, if that. But, I think that there's going to be enough action on this roster to make things interesting between now and the end of April.
David, I appreciate it. The Locked On Commanders podcast is 5 days a week, correct?
Yes, sir. Sometimes even more.
Sometimes even more. And this is, even though the season is over, this sometimes is a busier part of your season. Yeah. Maybe even by a long way, especially with all the new changes and so forth. So again, it's a great time to follow the team. Check out the links in the description of this video where you can follow David, both his content and his podcasting. And David, look forward to talking to you after the draft when we can recap the offseason for the Commanders.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you.
You got it. Thanks, David. All right, that's David Harrison, Locked On Commanders podcast. You can find his work also at W9USA. That is a new hookup for David. And again, we have that in the links of the description of the video. You can check it out right now while you're watching either live or on demand. And as you can see, let me pop that back up where we had Sadiq. So we had him as the 23rd pick in the draft. Look, really elite caliber tight ends will go in the top 10. It will be interesting to find out how high Sadiq could go. How is he looked at? Is he looked at as elite, or is he looked at as that next group? Because there's a big difference between taking Sadiq and the rest of the tight end class this season. So you do have to take that into consideration. It's a good thing for Sadiq, of course. That means that it's possible that it will trigger some teams like Washington and others to draft a little bit earlier. Let me see if I could pop up the rankings just to show you exactly what they look like right now for the tight ends. Here they are. So this is just a big gap. I mean, it's Sadiq, and then I honestly don't know if one will be picked in the second round. I don't know. I mean, we'll find out. It's possible. Of course, a lot has to happen between now and then. There is talent at tight end. You're going to be able to find a good player. You're going to be able to find a couple of good potential starting caliber tight ends, but it's just not really deep early. So and it also doesn't have, I don't believe it has a top 10 guy. I don't think they classify Sadiq top 10, but he really has been coming on, and he's a young kid. So the upside is there. So it only takes one general manager to fall in love, as we all know. So that's the tight end class for this year's draft. And there's a running back class, which is the same thing. It's Jeremiah Love and then a gap. Now, the difference between the gap, though, is the running backs, and this is just normal, there's more talent at running back than tight end. So, but once you get past Love, who is going to be drafted in the top 10, I don't think there's any chance he slips out of the top 10. He's too good. He shouldn't really go too high. Matter of fact, Washington is probably the highest he could go. I don't think that's where he's going to go. But hey, it's possible. We'll find out what happens in free agency. It's a deep class of edge rushers. That's the thing that makes this interesting, because right now we have David Bailey as the second edge rusher, and we have him going to the Commanders. So getting potentially the second best edge rusher, let's say whoever ends up as the number 2 rated edge rusher when it's all said and done. Let's say the Commanders can grab that guy, because they're not going to get Reuben Bain. Then the other question you could say to yourself is, well, it's such a deep class. Why should we go get an edge rusher now? Well, especially if we do well in free agency. So if you can go out and get that blue chip guy, if you can get that Hendrickson, and maybe you get another veteran, and then you sign a couple of guys from your own team, and you think, okay, I think we could afford now to take an edge rusher in, what is it? We have our third pick. Now, again, this is another reason why I think it makes a lot of sense if they do really well, Washington, in free agency at edge. I think it makes a lot of sense to trade down, because that gives you options like, and again, I don't know if it's 2 picks, 3 picks, 5 picks, 10 picks. Of course, the more you go, the more compensations you're going to get. And I don't think it's really that bad of an idea. If they have offers on the table and you can drop 3 spots or 10 spots, I think it's better off if you just drop the 10. You're going to get more capital. And I do not see a major difference between that 10th pick and, say, that 17th pick or 18th pick. So therefore, that might be a really good way to do it when you need draft capital. You need to get younger. And because they need to get younger, there's one major area that you can stock up, and that's the first round. So that could be what's going to happen. That could be a really good strategy, is you've got a really good deep class of edge rushers. We'll get one of those guys a little bit later on. And again, we could trade down immediately with our first pick. And then we have options. If we trade down 5 spots, 10 spots, 3 spots, like I said, you still have options for Sadiq. You still have options for Love. You still have options for edge rusher. So that really would make a lot of sense. Maybe even a surprise that the Commanders do not trade down from 7. Now, I have a lot of interviews to do. I think we've already done. I don't think we've even been done. Maybe we have half of the interviews so far out of the 32. But right now, from the amount I've done, I believe the Commanders have the least amount of draft capital. And even though everybody talks about, oh, yeah, we could trade down, this is the first time that I'm looking at a team that really does need to trade down. And it makes a lot of sense if they do. So we'll keep an eye on that. And because I don't know, you tell me, what would you guys as Commander fans, what would you rather do? Would you rather take the second, whoever's at number 2 edge rusher on the board at 7? Or because I don't think there's a big difference between going 7 edge rusher, say Bailey, and who do we have? Let me see here. Who do we have? Let me see where we have our next edge rusher. Probably not too far back. Let's see. There it is, at 9. I don't see a big difference between David Bailey and Cassius Howell or Keldrick Falk, who comes next. I just don't. So I think what you want, and look, let's say the Chiefs want an edge rusher and the Bengals want an edge rusher too, which they do. But let's say they do. Well, they're not going to trade with you because that's probably how they feel too. I don't want to move up and I got my guy. I'll get one of these guys. I doubt they really get it unless they are so in love with one of the guys but doubtful. That's why it does make even more sense that you start moving all the way down this area. Like, let's say the Ravens. Well, then again, edge rusher 2. So let's not say the Ravens. Let's say the Rams want a line. Well, you know what? If they can get Mekhi Lemon at 13 and they still want a wide receiver, I mean, you stay at 13 as far as I'm concerned. But there'll be a team. There'll be a team potentially that says, I want to move up. I want that 7th pick. I don't know who that is, but I want to move up and I want to get that guy. So that's the hard part, is finding that trade partner. Because like I said, I don't really see a big difference myself, and neither do they. But it only takes one. Again, it only takes one general manager that says, I want to move up to 7. And honestly, I think it'll be kind of hard unless it winds up being a team that either does not have a first-round draft pick, or let's say they're down here. They're really far down, and they really need to they really want to get higher. Let's say Pittsburgh. Let's say Pittsburgh really wants a receiver, and they want. Hey, I got to get one of those receivers. I got Lemon. He's like the worst case scenario, or Tate. I don't know which one is. I don't know the order. Still got time for the order. I honestly like Lemon more than Tate, but I understand why they love Tate because of the size deal. I get it. The size speed combo. But let's say it's the Steelers, and you got to move all the way down to 21 if you're Washington. Again, I have no idea what the Steelers, because I have yet to speak to my Pittsburgh contact yet. We're going to do that real soon. But let's just say I'm imagining it. They have abundance of cap space, but they've got to get that receiver. How do you know that they won't exercise next year's number 1 pick, especially if Aaron Rodgers comes back? See, if Aaron Rodgers comes back for 1 year, what do you think they're thinking about 3 years from now? No, they're thinking about, let's see if we can win a World Championship next year. And therefore, we want to get that elite receiver. So we're willing to give you next year's first-round pick because you know what? We're going to be really good next year. And that first-round pick is 21st here. Well, we feel pretty good about it being 26, 27, 32. Let's think positively. And if that's the case, then that's their thinking. So now you move down to 21 if you're Washington. You get a first rounder next year. But maybe even more importantly, of course, you'd say, okay, but I'm getting your second round pick too. And you're giving me something else. That's maybe what it will take. That's a lot of, I'm not going to say wishful thinking or hyperbole, but the fact is, this is why we do this time of year. And that's why I want to know what you guys think about staying at 7. And if you move down, how far do you want to move down? Would this be even something that you would consider? Something far down, 18, 17, 21. As long as you were able to recoup something really good, like maybe even next year's first round draft pick. This way you go into next year with a couple of first round draft picks. You've added a few more picks this year too, just by making one deal. And you can move that. Let's say you still want an edge rusher, Akeem Mesidor. He's there. He's in that vicinity. Anyone else? Again, it's a deep class of edge rushers. Well, I guess it drops off a little bit there, but there's still a few more on the board, as you can see right there. Okay, so that is that. Where am I? Yeah, that is that. So I am going to wrap this up. Just to let you know, we are going to be on the air again later tonight if you're into college basketball for our college basketball show as we preview some of the big games on tap for not only tonight, but for mostly tomorrow. There's one big game in the Big Ten tonight. Everything else is regarding tomorrow's slate. So we'll go over that. We've got a couple more future plays on board this week, including a team that plays tonight. So that's coming up on our college basketball show tonight, and football returns. Right now, we have it slated for next Thursday, as of right now, at 8 o'clock to talk some Jacksonville football, but I'm trying to book some earlier in the week appointments as well, and hopefully we'll be able to do that. So, again, like I said, I'm not even sure if we've gotten halfway through yet, but we're going through all 32, and thank our guest analysts like David Harrison for joining us here, and we're going to do this again quite a bit all the way through our 32nd interview. And you can also check out, of course, the Ourlads Football Network. We have links in the description for the 2026 draft guide. So you want to get a hold of that. There's no better Bible on this planet than the Ourlads draft guide for the type of scouting information you want. Hundreds of players in your draft guide. Just about, I'd say 95 to 98% of the players that are going to get drafted, and even some that are going to get signed afterwards are in the draft guide. So, and probably I would say about 75% of those, if not more, we have scouting reports on. So check that out. Links in the description of the video. And we're also going to be on air tomorrow for our NASCAR qualifying report. I got to start remembering that. That starts to kick in now that the Daytona 500 is on Sunday. So that's it for our coverage here. Washington Command, David Harrison, I'm Greg DePalma. Have a great weekend, everybody, and we will see you next time.